Hello, strong, beautiful, confident woman of God. Yes, I am talking to you. Welcome to the Purpose After Domestic Violence podcast, where getting freedom from the effects of domestic violence meets empowerment to walk in the fullness of your God-designed purpose. I am your host, Tina. I am an attorney, an author and speaker, and a Christian life purpose coach. I will be your guide here, helping you on your journey from overcoming victimhood and just simply surviving to stepping into the victorious life God has waiting just for you. As we travel this road together, Purpose After Domestic Violence is not just a podcast. It's a sacred space where the shackles of domestic violence are broken and empowerment takes root, grows, and flourishes. Here, we are not just surviving, we're thriving in the fullness of our God-designed purpose. I have personally walked the path from victimhood to victory, and I'm here to guide you through it. Picture me as your big sister, holding your hand, sharing wisdom and revelation, and helping you navigate the twists and turns of this path towards healing, freedom, and empowerment. Whether you're on the path to victory or seeking a guiding light in the storm, Purpose After Domestic Violence is here for you. Together, we'll illuminate the path forward to a life filled with purpose. Welcome, my sweet sister, to the Purpose After Domestic Violence podcast. Good morning, my sweet sisters. Okay, so last week we had our 1-year anniversary special episode, and I mentioned that I wasn't quite sure where God was taking me with this podcast, but I am so excited about where we're going. So I want to start today with sharing a business resource. Okay. So when we get to pathway after domestic violence, right? Pathway after DV, that's going to be really focusing on walking out your purpose. And I truly believe the biblical business model is entrepreneurship. Okay. Now, there's some caveats to that, right? But for the most part, I think that is God's model for business. And I am an entrepreneur, right? I have a law firm and then I have this courses and coaching business. Okay. So I want to share a book by Donald Miller called Building a Story Brand. Okay. And this book uses the 7 elements of great storytelling to grow your business. Okay. So God really had me do a deep dive. Okay. And over the years, I've done lots of different coaching programs, and every single one, you have to start with figuring out who is your who, right? So I've done a lot of that work, and they always recommend to name the person, but I've never done that. So my current business coach, who is Jennifer Allwood, by the way, because I don't think I've mentioned that before, um, she recently did a 3-day uh, opt-in challenge, which was fabulous. And it goes along with, and that was the thing that she started with too, figure out who your who is, and give her a name. So Becca did this challenge with me this time, and after the challenge was over, we discussed it, and we decided we needed to give our who a name, okay? And our who is you, okay? Our who is you. So I wish 5 years ago, one of my business coaches would have said, read Building a Story Brand before you do anything else. So I'm sharing that with you because if you're in a place in your life where you're thinking about starting a business, like read this book first before you do anything else and get this hammered down. Okay, so that's what I've been working on over the past few weeks. And I'm so extremely excited. So this is going to be an 8-part series. Um, and I'm going to read just a little bit out of this Building a Story Brand so you can kind of see where we're going. Okay. So this is based on, you know, the framework for a story, right? Every good story, every good movie you watch, and I'm going to actually use a little example of a movie that Donald Miller uses in his book. Okay, so I'm just going to read just a little bit of this. So, story in a nutshell. Okay, here is nearly every story you see or hear in a nutshell. A character or the hero of the story who wants something encounters a problem before they can get it. At the peak of their despair, a guide steps into their lives and gives them a plan and calls them to action. That action helps them avoid failure and ends in success. Okay. So who has watched The Hunger Games? I have. I have three boys. My middle son loved the Hunger Game movies. Okay, so in the Hunger Games, in the first Hunger Games movie, Katniss Everdeen must compete in a twisted fight to the death tournament forced upon the people of Pan Am by an evil, tyrannical government called the Capitol. The problem she faces is obvious. She must kill or be killed. Katniss is overwhelmed, underprepared, and outnumbered. Along comes Haymitch, the brash, liquor-loving, grizzled winner of the previous Hunger Games tournament. Haymitch assumes the role of Katniss's mentor, helping her hatch a plan to win over the public. This gains Katniss more sponsors, thereby equipping her with more resources for the fight and increasing her chances of winning. Right? So here's the first Hunger Games story laid out on the story brand grid. So Katniss clearly is the hero of the story, right? And her problem, so she has an external problem, which is she must survive, right? And then her internal problem, she must stay good and authentic, right? And the philosophical problem is tyranny versus democracy. So then she meets Haymitch, right? He's won the Hunger Games before. So he is the guide that comes along beside her. So she needs to um, endear the public to get sponsors. And then she has to compete, right? And that competition has two potential outcomes, right? Katniss dies and District 12 is crushed, or Katniss lives and District 12 rejoices. Okay, so this is Story Brand in a nutshell. The hero of the story wants something, encounters a problem before they can get that something. At the peak of their despair, a guide steps into their lives, gives them a plan, and calls them to action. That action helps them avoid failure and ends in success. Okay, so that is our story brand framework. So I'm going to be doing an 8-part series. And in today's episode, we're going to focus on the character of the story or the hero of the story. And Becca and I sat down, and when we were coming up with names, like I've always been so reluctant because I didn't want to pick a name that could potentially be one of our clients' actual names, right? So so I've always been reluctant, but I really also felt, Becca and I both felt we wanted to name her something, from the Bible. And so the Lord gave me the story of Naomi, okay? And now I'm going to read a section. This is out of the Women of the Bible. This is a 1-year devotional study of women in Scripture. And Naomi's story is in here, okay? So Naomi, her name means my joy or pleasant, okay? So her character, she suffered a threefold tragedy, right? Naomi refuses to hide her sorrow or bitterness. Believing in God's sovereignty, She attributed her suffering to his will. Uh-oh, that's her first mistake there, right? Because who knows, God does not put suffering on us, period. He doesn't. So if you believe that, let's get that out of your mind right now, okay? So her fixation on circumstances, both past and present, led to hopelessness. She was a kind and loving mother-in-law, and she inspired unusual love and loyalty in her daughters-in-law. Her sorrow was that she lost her husband and her two sons in a foreign land, far from family and friends. So she was isolated, right? Her joy to have returned safely to Bethlehem with her daughter-in-law, Ruth, who would eventually rekindle her happiness and hope. Okay, and her story is in Ruth, right? Okay, so Naomi, this is her story. She stood like an old tree twisted against the sky. Though Naomi could see for miles from her vantage point high on the road that led from Moab to Judah, she could glimpse nothing at all of her future. She thought about robbers rumored on the road ahead. What more, she wondered, could possibly be taken from her? Her thoughts strayed to the past. Moses, she knew, had been buried somewhere in these mountains, but his people and hers had moved west into Canaan centuries earlier. Would she too be left behind, prevented from ever seeing her kinfolk again? Was God so displeased with her? 10 years ago, she and her husband, Elimelech, had lived happily in Bethlehem, but the city whose name meant house of bread suddenly had none. So they had migrated to the highlands of Moab to escape the famine. Then Elimelech had died, and her sons had married Moabite women, whose race had descended from Abraham's nephew Lot. Plenty of women lost their husbands. Like them, she would find a way to survive. But then she had suffered the worst grief a mother could, outliving her own children. Now Ruth and Orpah, her daughters-in-law, were the only kin she had in Moab. Loving them tenderly, she felt their widowhood as a double grief. Together they had cried and comforted each other. The three women finally decided to leave Moab for Bethlehem. But once on the road, Naomi's misgivings outran her craving for companionship. It wasn't right for young women to forsake their families and friends for so uncertain a future. What chance would they, widows and strangers, have in Bethlehem, even now that the famine had run its course? Go back, each of you, to your mother's home, she told them. May the Lord show kindness to you as you have shown to your dead and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. But Orpah and Ruth insisted, we will go back with you to your people. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? The three women embraced, tears streaking their cheeks. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye. But Ruth clutched Naomi and whispered fiercely, where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me. The old woman's stubbornness was no match for the younger woman's love, and so Naomi and Ruth continued on to Bethlehem. After so long an absence, Naomi's return created a great commotion in the town, and all the women welcomed her, saying, can this be Naomi? Don't call me Naomi, she told them. Call me Mara, meaning bitter, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. Naomi could not see past her suffering. Like many of us, She may have felt as though her tragedies were punishment for her sins. Yet had she known the blessings in store, she might not have felt so hopeless. Instead, she may have compared herself to the tree that Job so graciously describes in Job 14:7 through 9. At least there is hope for a tree. If it is cut down, it will sprout again, and its new shoots will not fail. Its roots may grow old in the ground, and its stump die in the soil. Yet at the scent of water, it will bud and put forth shoots like a plant. Though she didn't know it, the scent of water was in the air. Naomi's life was beginning again, and her story was still unfolding. I love that. So Ruth decided that she was not going to go back to her family. She was going to stay with Naomi, and they traveled on to Bethlehem together, right? And Naomi came through such tragedy. She lost her husband, she lost both of her sons, and she lost one of her daughters-in-law too, right? Because Orpah went back to her family. Mm. Okay. So, when we come out of domestic violence, right? We lose our husband. It's like a death, right? Divorce is like a death. Um, and our relationships with our kids, right, can be damaged. So I really see that for us as women who have experienced domestic violence, our story is a lot like Naomi's. And we may feel like God, put this suffering on it. What did I do wrong? This must be punishment, right? I feel like we can really identify with how Naomi was feeling. But I want to read another section. This is Naomi's promise, okay? God's faithfulness to restore to fullness an empty life is revealed more in this story of Naomi than in any other biblical account. That's why I love, love, love this story when thinking about, who my who is and the name that we're going to give our who. Okay. So the famine and hunger that drove Naomi and her husband and sons away from Bethlehem are finally replaced with full harvests and bread baked from grain gleaned in the fields, right? From Ruth's story. The anguish of losing her husband and sons is replaced with the loving care and concern of her daughter-in-law, Ruth, who is better to Naomi than 7 sons. And Naomi's empty mother arms are filled with the son of Boaz and Ruth. She is no absent grandmother. The scriptures say Naomi took Obed and laid him in her lap and cared for him. Like Naomi, we may have trouble recognizing God's goodness and his faithfulness at times, but he is still with us no matter the circumstances. Psalm 71:20 says, "Though you have made me see troubles, many and bitter, you will restore my life again." That's his promise to you, right? And Joel 2:25 and 26 says, "I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten. You will have plenty to eat until you are full, and you will praise the name of the Lord your God, who has worked wonders for you." I love that. I love that. God's promises to us as his daughters, oh my gosh, they're countless, right? The Bible is full of promises for us. So good. So good. Okay. So, drum roll, please. When Becca and I were talking and really thinking about what to name the hero of our story, we have named her Mara. Okay. And Mara means bitter, right? And so Naomi wasn't necessarily calling herself bitter. She was calling the experiences that she went through, losing her husband, losing her sons, as bitter. Okay. So Naomi wasn't a bitter person, right? She wasn't bitter. Otherwise, she wouldn't have helped Ruth and guided her to finding Boaz and being, redeemed and being part of Jesus's genealogy, right? So now I want to move into you, right? My sweet sister, whatever your name is, you've been through a lot. And I'm here to tell you today that God did not put that suffering on you, okay? Um, and as his daughter, he wants you, he wants to turn you into the strong, beautiful, confident woman of God that he created. He knew you before you were in your mother's womb. He had a story written for you. What we want to accomplish now in this season is getting you off the path of destruction, off the path of bitterness, and reroute you. I kind of see a GPS, right? When you pass a street, it says recalculating route, right? That's what we're going to do here. We're going to recalculate your route. Okay. And we are going to get you back on the path that leads to God's full purpose and destiny for you. This is so exciting. Okay. So good. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to see the woman that you are going to become. So good. Okay. All right. So you, my sweet sister, are the hero of your own story. Okay. All right. And then just like Mara, you probably feel stuck in life, right? And you can't figure out why you're stuck. But the story isn't over. Your story is not over. In fact, I have a great resource. So I told you Becca and I did this 3-day opt-in challenge. So we created a free resource for you. And that resource is called The Top 3 Reasons You're Stuck in Survivor Mode After Experiencing Domestic Violence and How to Break Free. Okay, so that link is going to be in the show notes. So you can click on that link and get that free download. And then there's a couple other free resources in that resource. Okay. So exciting. So you, my sweet sister, are the hero of your story. And I am going to, over the next, there's actually going to be 8 podcasts, right? We're going to dive into each and every layer of that story brand framework. Okay. And I really believe, next week we're going to talk about the problem. And I really feel like the the basic problem that you're facing in your life right now is that you're stuck in survivor mode, you know? Um, we can either be victims of domestic violence or we can be survivors of domestic violence. Um, but I'm here to tell you that there's a third option. There's a third option. You can actually become the strong, beautiful, confident woman of God that God created you to be. And I'm so excited to come alongside you in this journey. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is break down a little bit of who I think you are and why I think that. Okay. All right. So you have left domestic violence. So you've experienced domestic violence in your past, okay? You have gotten out of the relationship. You're most likely a Christian woman. I feel like if you've been listening to a full year of my podcast, you know that I am Christian, and I totally believe that really a relationship with Jesus and Father God and Holy Spirit honestly is the only way to overcome this stuff, right? Okay. And so age-wise, you're probably like 35 to 55. Um, and if you're on, an outlier on either end of that age spectrum, I'm not discounting you at all. Okay. You are included in it. If this is resonating with you, if Naomi's story and the name Mara is resonating with you, it certainly applies to you. Okay. Now, the other thing is, you know that there's a call of God on your life. Okay. You may or may not know exactly what that is, but you do know that you are stuck and you've been spinning your wheels and you've been trying to get there and you cannot figure out why you can't get there. Okay. And next week, we're going to talk about the problem. And I am going to reveal to you why you're stuck. And we're going to break down the villain of the story. We're going to introduce the villain of the story, and we're going to talk about your external, your internal, and your philosophical problems. Okay. So for today, go download the top 3 reasons you're stuck in survivor mode after experiencing domestic violence and how to break free. And we will chat more next week. I'm so excited to invite you into this story. I also said, I was going to tell you why I think this, right? I will say, let me do a little bunny trail on my experience with coaching, with business coaching. You know, all the big coaches say, identify your who. But I did hear one teaching in one of my groups that said, forget about trying to come up with who your who is, because your who is who you were 10 years ago. And that resonated with me so deeply because, and the reason I know your story so well is because it was my story, and more like 20 years ago now. But yeah, so I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. I hope that you're excited to come back next week to really dig into the problem. And I think you're going to get some massive revelation because we're going to go deep and wide. The problem certainly is that you've experienced domestic violence, but it's so much more than that. And there is a true villain in this story. So come back next week and we'll dive into the problem. I love you, my sweet sister. Have a blessed week, and we will chat again soon. Thank you so much for joining me on my Purpose After Domestic Violence podcast. I hope today's conversation resonated with you. And if you think it could encourage someone you know, please share it. Together, we can spread the light of healing and purpose. I would so appreciate it if you would like, subscribe, and leave me a review. These small actions would bless me indeed and help other women find this podcast and be encouraged too. Remember, you are not alone. Your strength is undeniable, and your journey is worth celebrating. If you have questions, thoughts, or topics you'd like me to explore in the future, Please reach out on social media, or you can visit my website at purposeafterdv.com. Before we part ways, always remember, you are a strong, beautiful, confident woman of God, and your purpose is shining brightly within you. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and keep moving forward on your journey to a life filled with purpose.